90 hours a week. No weekends, no overtime, not even a thank you. Then they fired me with an email at 11:52 p.m. Subject line, restructuring notice. I cried in the parking lot until my eyes burned dry. But by 3 a.m. that night, I knew exactly what I had to do. They thought they were done with me. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed, 12 years of data, gone forever, and they'll never get it back. My name is Rebecca Langston, and for 13 years, I was the invisible backbone of QuantiveX Solutions. At 37, I'd spent more than a third of my life keeping their systems running, their data flowing, their executives looking competent in board meetings they barely understood. I started at QuantiveX when I was 24, fresh out of Missouri State with a computer science degree and dreams of building something meaningful. Back then, we were just 12 people crammed into a converted warehouse in downtown St. Louis, everyone wearing multiple hats, everyone believing we were revolutionizing insurance technology. I was employee number 8. By the time they fired me, I was the last one left from those early days. The past 8 months had been hell, pure, unfiltered, soul-crushing hell. When the company decided to migrate our entire data infrastructure from legacy systems to the cloud, guess who got tapped to lead the project? Not the shiny new hires with their fancy certifications. Not the consultants charging $300 an hour. Me. Because I was the only one who understood how our Frankenstein's monster of a system actually worked. 90 hours a week became my new normal. I'd arrive at 6 a.m., leave past midnight, then wake up at 4 a.m. to check overnight processes from home. Saturdays blurred into Sundays. I ate most meals at my desk, developing an intimate relationship with every vending machine in the building. My apartment became just a place to shower and grab clean clothes. Just until the migration is complete. Brad Morrison, our CEO, would say during our weekly check-ins, his practiced smile never quite reaching his eyes. "You're invaluable to this company. Rebecca, once we're through this, there's a director of systems position with your name on it, maybe even some equity options." I believed him. God help me, I actually believed him. My team had been downsized to nothing. Budget constraints, they said, while hiring Brad's golf buddy as VP of Strategic Initiatives at twice my salary. So I worked alone, writing scripts, managing databases, troubleshooting issues that would have stumped a team of 10. I became a machine myself. Input coffee, output code, repeat until collapse. My friends stopped calling after I canceled plans for the dozenth time. My sister gave up inviting me to family dinners. Even my cat seemed to forget who I was, hissing when I'd stumble in during my rare trips home. But it would all be worth it, I told myself. Director of Systems, Equity, Recognition. Finally being seen as more than just the woman who kept the lights on, I was a fool. A tired, overworked, desperately naive fool who thought loyalty meant something in corporate America. But I was about to learn exactly how much my 13 years of dedication were worth to QuantiveX Solutions. The email arrived at 11:52 p.m. on a Thursday. I was still at my desk, monitoring the final batch processing for our biggest clients' quarterly reports. My eyes burned from staring at terminal windows, and my fourth energy drink of the night was making my hands shake slightly as I clicked open the message from HR. Subject: Restructuring Notice. Effective immediately. My heart stopped, then started again, hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. Dear Rebecca, due to ongoing restructuring efforts and strategic realignment of our technical departments, we regret to inform you that your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Your system access will be terminated at midnight tonight. Please coordinate with security to return your badge and company equipment by noon tomorrow. We thank you for your contributions to QuantiveX Solutions. That was it. 13 years condensed into 3 cold paragraphs. No signature from Brad, no personal note, not even the courtesy of a phone call. I read it again, then again. The words blurred as tears I didn't know I was crying dropped onto my keyboard. My hands moved on autopilot, saving my work, closing programs, as if my brain couldn't process what was happening. The real knife twist came in the email's CC line, Ethan Monroe, Ethan fucking Monroe. The 26-year-old wonder boy who'd interned here last summer, who couldn't tell a database from a spreadsheet, who'd spent more time networking at happy hours than learning our systems. The same Ethan who happened to be Brad's wife's nephew. The same Ethan who'd been shadowing me for the past month. Just to learn the ropes. Now I understood why. I sat there, frozen, watching the clock tick toward midnight. At 11:59, I tried to access our main server, already locked out. My email went dark at 12:01. 13 years of conversations, project plans, thank you notes from clients, gone, like I'd never existed. The security guard, Marcus, looked uncomfortable when I finally made it to the lobby at 12:47 a.m. We'd shared hundreds of late-night conversations over the years. He'd shown me pictures of his grandkids. I'd helped him reset his password more times than I could count. "I'm sorry, Rebecca," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "They told me. They said you knew this was coming. Did they?" My voice sounded strange, hollow. "Did they tell you I worked 90 hours this week, that I haven't taken a sick day in 8 months, that I just finished migrating 12 years of their data to the cloud?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "You need to turn in your badge." I pulled it from my pocket, staring at the photo. Younger me, smiling, believing in things like hard work and company loyalty. I set it on the counter with a soft click that somehow sounded final. The walk to my car felt endless. Other late-night workers passed by, probably consultants or contractors, none of them knowing they were watching someone's career die in real time. My legs felt disconnected from my body, like I was floating, observing myself from above. I made it to my car before the breakdown hit. Full body, ugly crying, the kind that makes you gag and hyperventilate. I screamed into my steering wheel, pounded the dashboard, cursed Brad and Ethan and every executive who'd smiled while working me to death. A couple walking by stared, then hurried away. Just another corporate casualty having a breakdown in the parking lot. Nothing to see here. My phone buzzed. A text from Brad. "Rebecca, I wanted to reach out personally. This wasn't an easy decision, but we need fresh perspectives for our new cloud infrastructure. Ethan will be taking over as Director of Systems. I'm sure you understand. Best of luck in your future endeavors." Director of Systems. My promised position. Given to a kid who couldn't write a SQL query if his life depended on it. Another text, this one from Sarah in accounting. "OMG Rebecca, I just heard. This is insane. You literally built this place." Then another from James in development. "Are they fucking serious, Ethan? The guy who asked me what GitHub was last week?" The messages kept coming. Shock, outrage, disbelief from the people who actually understood what I did. But none of them would speak up tomorrow. They had mortgages, families, their own fears about being restructured out of existence. I turned off my phone and sat in the darkness, listening to my ragged breathing slowly normalize. The parking lot lights cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. They thought they were done with me, thought they could use me up and discard me like obsolete hardware. But they'd made one crucial mistake, one tiny oversight in their rush to hand my job to their nepotism hire. They'd forgotten that I knew where all the bodies were buried, and more importantly, they'd forgotten that I was the one who'd buried them. 12 years. That's how long I'd been the keeper of Quantum X's digital secrets. Not 13 like I'd said before, the first year didn't count. I was just another junior developer then, wide-eyed and eager. But after Dimitri, our original systems architect, quit in a rage over broken promises, sound familiar? Everything fell to me. I became the accidental architect of everything. When our CRM crashed during a major pitch, I wrote the recovery scripts that saved the deal. When our billing system hemorrhaged customer data, I built the patches that stopped the bleeding. When the SEC came knocking about compliance issues, I created the audit trails that kept us out of federal prison. Every emergency, every crisis, every panicked 3 a.m. call, they all led to my desk, and I fixed them all, creating Band-Aid after Band-Aid until our infrastructure looked like a trauma patient held together with duct tape and prayer. But it worked. It always worked, because I made it work. The early days were chaos. We had no documentation standards, no version control, no disaster recovery plans, just a growing mess of interconnected systems that only made sense if you'd been there for every iteration. I wrote it all down, of course, in my own shorthand, in my own filing system, in repositories I controlled. Who else would understand it anyway? Brad never cared about the details. During our architecture reviews, his eyes would glaze over the moment I mentioned database schemas or API endpoints. "Just keep it running, Rebecca," he'd say, already checking his phone. "That's why we have you." So I kept it running. The customer database with its 17 different versions of truth. The financial system held together by scheduled scripts I'd written during my lunch breaks. The email archives that contained every promise, every threat, every legally questionable decision made since 2013. The backup systems that I'd designed, implemented, and, crucially, administered alone. They never questioned why I insisted on managing certain systems personally. Rebecca's particular about her code became a running joke. Let them laugh. They didn't realize I was the only one who knew that the Prod Backup 7 server existed, hidden in a forgotten corner of our Azure subscription. Or that I'd been routing copies of critical data through personal encryption keys for years, just in case I ever needed to prove something. I wasn't planning anything malicious. It was insurance, I told myself. Protection against the day when my institutional knowledge might be the only thing keeping me employed. Funny how that worked out. The company grew, and my responsibilities multiplied. New hires would come in with their fresh degrees and trendy frameworks, last about 6 months trying to untangle our legacy code, then flee to startups that promised clean architectures and unlimited PTOs. I stayed. I always stayed. I became a translator between the old and new, the only person who could explain why the invoice processing system needed to run at exactly 3:17 a.m. because of a hard-coded dependency from 2014 that would take months to fix properly. I was the keeper of passwords to systems whose original vendors had gone bankrupt. I was the only one who knew which database tables could never be modified without breaking integrations nobody remembered. We had. "You're irreplaceable," Brad would say during my annual reviews, giving me a 3% raise while hiring his college roommate as CFO at a 7-figure salary. I believed being irreplaceable meant job security. I didn't realize it just meant being too valuable to promote and too expensive to properly compensate. Over the years, I'd built myself into every critical system like digital DNA. My scripts, my configurations, my workarounds, they were everywhere. The monitoring systems that alerted when something went wrong, I wrote those. The automated backups that saved us from ransomware twice, my design. The complex web of integrations that let our patchwork systems talk to each other, all me. But here's what they never understood. I hadn't just built these systems. I'd built them with backdoors. Not malicious ones. I'm not a criminal. Just administrative oversights. Test accounts that never got disabled. Backup locations that weren't in the official documentation. API keys that I generated personally and never transferred to the company vault. Every good engineer builds in redundancy. I just made sure some of that redundancy answered only to me. The migration to the cloud over these past 8 months, that had been my masterpiece, moving 12 years of technical debt to a modern infrastructure while keeping everything running. I documented every step, every decision, every compromise. But I documented it in my way, in my systems, with my access controls. They thought they were getting a clean, modern infrastructure. They were, but they didn't realize it came with a single point of failure, me. And they just fired that point of failure with an email at 11:52 p.m. As I sat in that parking lot, memories of 12 years flooded back. Every late night, every weekend, every vacation interrupted by production emergencies. I'd given them everything. Now they were about to learn what everything really meant. The parking lot was nearly empty now. Just me, a few scattered cars, and the weight of what had just happened. I couldn't go home. Home meant facing my empty apartment, my neglected life, The reality that I'd sacrificed everything for a company that discarded me like used hardware. Instead, I drove, aimlessly at first, through the empty streets of downtown St. Louis, past the darkened office buildings full of people who still had jobs to go to tomorrow. The city lights blurred through tears I couldn't seem to stop. I found myself at the 24-hour diner on Manchester Road where I used to grab coffee during all-nighters when I was still young enough to think exhaustion was a badge of honor. The waitress recognized me. "Late night at the office, hun?" "Last one," I said, sliding into a booth. I ordered coffee I didn't want and stared at my reflection in the black surface. 37 years old. Bags under my eyes that concealer couldn't hide anymore. Gray streaks in hair I hadn't had time to color in months. When had I become this person? This ghost of a woman who existed only in server rooms and Slack channels. My laptop bag sat beside me, and I pulled out my personal machine. Muscle memory had me checking work emails before I remembered I didn't have work emails anymore. The logout screen stared back at me, as final as a death certificate, but I still had other access. Legal access, technically. Personal tools I'd been using for years that happened to connect to company resources. The cloud migration had been so complex, so rushed, that I'd had to use every tool at my disposal. Some of those tools were mine. I opened my password manager. Hundreds of entries, accumulated over 12 years. Most would be dead now, terminated at midnight like my employment. But scrolling through them was like reading my own obituary. Each password a project completed, a crisis averted, a promise that hard work would pay off. Then I found it. Test Backup Admin RL. An account I'd created 3 months ago for the disaster recovery testing. It was supposed to be temporary. Deleted after the test. But the test kept getting postponed. And in the chaos of the migration, nobody had followed up on the cleanup tickets. Nobody except me even knew it existed. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could feel two versions of myself fighting. The ethical engineer who'd always done the right thing, and the woman who'd just been betrayed by people she'd killed herself to protect. I thought about Ethan Monroe, probably out celebrating his promotion right now. Director of Systems. My title. My work. My sacrifice handed to him like a party favor. He'd smiled at me just yesterday, asking questions about our backup procedures, taking notes like an eager student. I'd been training my own replacement and didn't even know it. The anger came in waves, not hot rage anymore, but something colder, more calculated. They'd taken 13 years of my life. Nights, weekends, holidays. They'd taken my health. I'd developed chronic migraines from the stress, carpal tunnel from the endless typing. They'd taken my relationships. The boyfriend who left because I was always working. The friends who stopped calling. The family gatherings I'd missed. And for what? For Brad's boat. For executive bonuses. For the privilege of being replaced by someone's nephew. I thought about the systems I'd built. The digital house of cards only I truly understood. How long before Ethan realized the billing system would crash if the Tuesday maintenance didn't run in exactly the right order? How long before he discovered the customer database had undocumented dependencies on servers he didn't even know existed? How long before the whole thing came tumbling down? But that wasn't enough. They'd hire consultants, throw money at the problem, eventually figure it out. Maybe lose some clients, take a stock hit. But they'd survive. They'd paint me as the bitter ex-employee who'd left things a mess. Use me as a scapegoat for every future failure. No. If they wanted to erase me, I'd return the favor. The test account credentials worked. Of course they did. I was staring at the admin panel for our backup infrastructure, the safety net I'd spent years perfecting. Every piece of data, every transaction, every email, it all flowed through here. 12 years of corporate history, customer records, financial data, intellectual property, all of it. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification. Brad Morrison had updated his status. Excited to announce Ethan Monroe as our new Director of Systems. Fresh perspectives for a new era at Quantiv X. fresh perspectives. After I'd just spent 8 months killing myself to drag their prehistoric infrastructure into the modern age, I closed the laptop. Not yet. Not in anger. If I was going to do this, it would be calculated, careful, complete. Just like everything else I'd ever done for them. The coffee had gone cold. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten, that pale gray that comes before dawn. Another all-nighter. But this time, it would be my last. I left cash on the table and walked back to my car. I had planning to do, scripts to write. One final project for QuantiveX Solutions. They wanted fresh perspectives. I'd give them a fresh start. Tabula rasa, a completely clean slate. They just wouldn't like how clean it would be. I drove home as the sun rose, my mind already writing code. Not the frantic, desperate code of an all-nighter, but something more elegant. Surgical. This would be my finest work, not because of what it would create, but because of what it would destroy. My apartment felt foreign after so many months of barely seeing it. Mail piled by the door. Dead plants on the windowsill. The cat had long since gone to live with my sister. I made coffee, real coffee, not break room swill, and sat at my personal desk. 3 monitors, mechanical keyboard. The setup I'd dreamed of using for my own projects if I ever had time. Now I had nothing but time. First, I mapped out what I knew. The test backup admin account had broad access, but I needed to be smart. Any action would be logged, traced, potentially recoverable if I wasn't careful. But I'd designed these systems. I knew their blind spots better than anyone. The beauty was in the simplicity. I wouldn't need to hack anything or break any laws. I'd use the very tools I'd created, the automation scripts that had saved QuantiveX millions in operational costs. They just needed a few modifications. I started with the backup rotation script. Every night at 2 a.m., it would identify backups older than 90 days and mark them for deletion. A simple change. Instead of 90 days, how about 1 day? Instead of marking for deletion pending review, how about immediate, irreversible purging? Next, the database maintenance routines. They ran weekly, cleaning up temporary tables, optimizing indexes. What if they cleaned up a bit more aggressively? What if temporary included? Everything. The document management system was trickier. But I remembered a vulnerability I'd been meaning to patch. The system trusted internal service accounts implicitly. It wouldn't question why test backup admins suddenly needed to reorganize 12 years of contracts, specifications, and client records into the digital equivalent of a black hole. But the masterstroke would be the audit logs themselves. I'd built our compliance system to be tamper-proof, creating immutable records of every significant action. Except for one small backdoor I'd left for emergency maintenance. After all, what if we needed to correct a logging error that could trigger a compliance violation? Brad had approved it himself, probably without reading the technical details. I worked methodically, testing each script in my local environment. This wasn't about random destruction. It was about complete erasure, like performing surgery with a scalpel made of entropy. The scripts would run in sequence, each one creating the conditions for the next. First, disable the alerting systems, a routine maintenance mode that could last up to 48 hours without triggering concerns. Then, begin the rotation. Backups first, then live data, then the systems that might be used to recover that data. The beautiful part? I'd make it look like Ethan did it. Not maliciously, I wasn't trying to frame him. But his credentials were already all over the system from his training sessions. His rookie mistakes had left digital fingerprints everywhere. When the scripts ran, they'd use his access patterns, his typical login times, even mimicking his habit of running commands multiple times because he wasn't sure they'd worked the first time. It would look like incompetence, not sabotage. Like someone who didn't understand the systems had tried to run routine maintenance and catastrophically failed, which, knowing Ethan, was exactly what would happen eventually anyway. I was just accelerating the timeline. I built in delays, randomization, false starts. The scripts would begin their work 72 hours after activation, enough time for me to be definitively elsewhere. ideally with witnesses. They'd run slowly at first, deleting old backups that nobody would notice were missing until they were needed, then accelerating, consuming more recent data until the cascade became unstoppable. By the time anyone noticed, it would be far too late. The beauty of automated systems is that they're very efficient. The same scripts that had been faithfully protecting QuantivaX's data for years would eat through it like digital termites, following their new instructions with mechanical precision. I leaned back, looking at the code I'd written. Clean, commented, professional. The best work I'd done in years, technically speaking. It used every trick I'd learned, every optimization technique, every deep understanding of how these systems actually functioned versus how management thought they functioned. One button to activate it all. One commit to the repository that everyone had forgotten existed. That had my personal SSH keys because I'd set it up during a crisis when the corporate key management system was down. I saved everything to an encrypted drive, then copied it to 2 more. Not because I planned to use them. Once this was done, these drives would join the data they were designed to delete. But I wanted backups, even now, even for this. I was still thinking like an engineer. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to use best practices to implement worst outcomes, but I wasn't ready to push the button. Not yet. First, I needed an alibi. Then, I needed to decide if I could really do this. If I could burn down 12 years of my own work along with theirs. I made another coffee and watched the sun climb higher over St. Louis. Somewhere across town, Ethan Monroe was probably waking up in his luxury apartment, excited about his new title, oblivious to the fact that he'd inherited a kingdom built on sand. And I held the tide in my hands. 3 days. That's how long I waited. 3 days of perfecting my alibi. Of making sure I was seen everywhere but near a computer. I drove to Chicago. Checked into a hotel under my name, made sure the cameras caught me. I visited my sister, helped her with her kids, posted pictures on social media. Look at Rebecca. Finally taking a break. Finally living life. Meanwhile, my scripts were counting down. On the morning of the 3rd day, I was having breakfast with my sister when my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Another. By the 5th call, my sister was looking at me strangely. You should probably answer that. It was James from development. Rebecca, thank God. Something's wrong with the systems. Everything's disappearing. Ethan doesn't know what to do. Can you? I don't work there anymore. James. My voice was calm, steady. My sister could hear every word. They'll have to figure it out. But Rebecca, it's bad, really bad. The backups are gone. The primary databases are corrupting. Even the documentation wiki is blank. It's like someone took a giant eraser to everything. I'm sure Ethan can handle it. He's the director of systems now. I hung up. My sister raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She knew what they'd done to me. The calls kept coming. James, Sarah from accounting, even Marcus the security guard. I didn't answer any of them. But I watched my personal monitoring dashboard on my phone, the one I'd never told them about, connected to sensors I'd placed throughout their infrastructure years ago, just green lights turning red, one by one, like watching a city lose power from above. By noon, Brad called. I answered on speaker, making sure my sister could hear. Rebecca, we need you back. Now. Contract basis. Whatever you want. Name your price. I'm in Chicago, Brad. With my family. You know, the family I haven't seen in 8 months because I was working 90-hour weeks. This is serious. We're losing everything. Client data, financial records, even our source code repositories. Ethan says it's some kind of cascade failure. I almost laughed. Cascade failure. That was one way to describe it. Sounds like you need someone with fresh perspectives, I said. I'm sure Ethan will figure it out. After all, that's why you hired him, right? Rebecca, please. We'll make this right. The promotion, the equity, everything we discussed. Everything you promised and then gave to your wife's nephew. Silence. My sister's eyes widened. I'll pay you directly, Brad said finally. My personal funds. 100,000. Cash. Just come back and fix this. I don't know what you expect me to do. My access was terminated, remember? Effective immediately. I couldn't help even if I wanted to. We'll restore everything. Full admin access. Just please. No. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from satisfaction, from the pure, distilled karma of the moment. The final phase would be starting now. The audit logs themselves being overwritten, the disaster recovery sites being wiped, even the off-site tape backups being triggered for routine recycling. I'd been thorough. 12 years of data disappearing into the digital void, irretrievable, irreversible. My phone exploded with messages, LinkedIn, personal email, text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. The tech community in St. Louis was small. Word was spreading. Quantive X was melting down in real time. Then came the message that made it all worthwhile. A screenshot from someone still inside, showing an all-hands email from Brad. Team, we are experiencing a critical system failure caused by administrator error. Our new director of systems is working to resolve the issue. Please remain calm and avoid speculation. Administrator error. Not even the dignity of admitting they'd lost everything. Just blame shifted to Ethan, who was probably crying in the server room right now, clicking desperately through empty folders and corrupted databases. By evening, the news had hit tech blogs. Major insurance tech firm suffers complete data loss. The stock price was in free fall. Clients were threatening lawsuits. 12 years of contracts, proof of insurance, claim records, gone. I turned off my phone and helped my sister make dinner. Her kids chattered about school, blissfully unaware that their aunt had just executed the most thorough corporate execution in tech history. We watched a movie. I slept in the guest room, better than I had in months. The message had been delivered, even if they'd never see it. It was coded into the last log entry before the system ate itself, visible for just a moment before disappearing forever. If you think 90 hours a week earns you nothing, try rebuilding 12 years without me. They wanted fresh perspectives. They got the freshest possible, a blank slate. Tabula rasa. Everything they'd built on my back, every profit earned from my sacrifice, every lie told in boardrooms about their robust infrastructure. All of it reduced to nothing. Just like they'd reduced me to nothing with an email at 11:52 p.m. The only difference? They couldn't rebuild from a backup because I had been their backup, and they'd fired me. 6 months later, I was nobody. And it was perfect. I'd left St. Louis the week after Quantive X collapsed, sold my apartment, deleted my LinkedIn, changed my phone number. The FBI investigation found exactly what I knew they'd find: catastrophic incompetence by an unqualified administrator who'd been given access beyond his abilities. Ethan Monroe, the nepotism hire who destroyed a company in 3 days. They tried to find me, of course, private investigators, lawyers, forensic analysts. But Rebecca Langston had been erased as thoroughly as Quantive X's data. I'd learned from the best. After all, I'd learned from myself. I rented a cabin in Northern California, deep in the redwoods where cell service was a rumor and internet was something you drove 20 minutes to town to use. My savings would last years up here. I bought a typewriter at an antique store and started writing, not code, but stories, fiction. Things that were meant to be created and shared, not hoarded by corporations who saw creativity as a resource to be exploited. The laptop came with me, of course, old habits, but it stayed powered off, buried in a drawer beneath winter clothes. A monument to a life I'd left behind. I grew vegetables, learned woodworking, adopted a rescue dog who didn't care about my commit history or uptime statistics. Some mornings, I'd wake up and forget, just for a moment, that I'd ever been anything other than the quiet woman who lived at the end of the dirt road. The news found its way to me, eventually. Quantive X had filed for bankruptcy. Hundreds of employees lost their jobs. Brad Morrison was facing criminal negligence charges. Ethan Monroe had become industry poison, his name a cautionary tale told in IT departments about the importance of proper succession planning. I felt bad for the innocent employees, the developers, accountants, and support staff who'd lost their livelihoods because of executive greed and incompetence. But they'd land on their feet. Good people always did. The market absorbed them, probably into better companies that might actually value them. As for Brad and Ethan and the executives who'd built their wealth on the backs of people like me, they learned what it felt like to have everything taken away in an instant. To be told their contributions meant nothing, to be restructured out of existence. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder if I'd gone too far, if destruction on that scale could ever be justified. But then I'd remember the email. 11:52 p.m. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately. After 13 years, after 90-hour weeks, after everything, they'd created me. The girl who'd walked into that warehouse 13 years ago would never have been capable of what I'd done. She believed in fairness, in hard work being rewarded, in corporate loyalty being a two-way street. They'd killed her one broken promise at a time, one missed holiday at a time, one just until the migration is complete at a time. What emerged from her ashes was someone who understood the truth. Loyalty in corporate America is a luxury only the powerful can afford. The rest of us are just resources to be optimized, then discarded when the spreadsheet demands it. I picked up my pen and continued writing. Fiction was cleaner than reality. In stories, justice didn't require destroying everything you'd built. In stories, the good guys won without becoming monsters themselves. But this wasn't a story. This was real life, where a woman could give 13 years of her life to a company and be erased with an email. Where nepotism trumped competence. Where working yourself to death was rewarded with unemployment. In real life, sometimes the only justice is the kind you code yourself. The dog barked, wanting his evening walk. I set down my pen, grabbed his leash, and stepped out into the forest. The trees here were older than Quanavex's entire corporate history. They'd be standing long after everyone forgot a company by that name had ever existed, just like they'd already forgotten I existed. I smiled, breathing in the clean air, somewhere, in a different life. Servers were humming with data I'd never touch again. But here, in this moment, there was only silence, the most beautiful sound in the world. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was intense, maybe even controversial, but sometimes the most powerful tales are the ones that make us uncomfortable. I'm curious, where are you listening to this right now? Are you in your office, maybe working late yourself, on your commute? Or perhaps, like Rebecca, you're somewhere far from the corporate world? Drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories like this. And please share your thoughts. Have you ever felt like Rebecca? What would you have done in her place? Let's discuss in the comments. Your stories matter too.